Welcome to the deep dive. Right now, a really significant event is unfolding.
Yes, the Papal Conclave. It started Wednesday, May 7th.
Exactly. And you have 133 cardinal electors gathered in Rome. They're choosing the next pope.
Leader of, 1.4 billion Catholics globally? So, yeah, the stakes are incredibly high.
Immense weight, absolutely. Not just for the church itself, but, its influence worldwide.
Mm-hmm. And the whole process is just steeped in centuries of tradition. The outcome really will set the church's course.
For years to come. So for this deep dive, we wanted to really get under the hood of it all. We've looked at pieces from The Guardian, Georgetown University, CBS News.
Good sources, lots of detail there.
Right. Our goal is to unpack how this conclave actually works, look at some of the history behind it, and figure out what key things you should be watching for.
Sounds good. Where should we start? The chapel itself.
Yeah, let's go inside the Sistine Chapel, metaphorically speaking. Who exactly is in that room making the decision?
Okay, so those 133 cardinal electors.
Yeah.
Crucially, they all have to be under 80 years old.
And they've come from all over.
Oh, absolutely. It's genuinely a global group. You've got just over 50 from Europe. Italy still has a big contingent, naturally.
Okay.
But then there are 10 from the U.S., 23 from Asia, 21 from Central and South America, and 18 from Africa.
Wow. That really shows the church's reach these days.
It really does.
Yeah.
A universal church reflected in its electors.
And this global group then enters this, intensely secret process. The reports talk about handing in phones, sweeping for bugs, jamming devices even. Sounds like something out of a spy movie.
It does, doesn't it? But that level of secrecy is paramount.
Yeah.
The idea is to shield the cardinals completely from any outside pressure or, influence.
Makes sense.
Before they even start, they take this very solemn oath of secrecy. And then you hear that Latin phrase.
Extra omnes.
Exactly. Extra omnes. Everyone out. It's powerful. It signals that moment when everyone non-essential leaves, the doors are locked.
And they're sealed off.
Right. It emphasizes just how sacred and private this decision is meant to be. Just the electors and a handful of necessary staff remain inside.
Locked away. So it's a very serious tone, doesn't it? So once they're inside, how does the voting actually happen? Are there, big debates? Speeches?
Well, interestingly, no. Not in the way we might think of, say, a political convention.
Oh.
The focus inside the chapel is really on prayer and the actual act of voting.
So no campaigning inside the chapel walls?
No. After initial mass, they usually have the first vote on that first afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Then from the second day, the pace picks up. They can hold up to 4 votes a day.
4? Wow.
Yeah, typically 2 in the morning, then a break, then 2 in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And this continues until someone gets that required 2/3 majority.
2/3. Okay. That sounds like a demanding schedule. 4 ballots a day. What's the sort of daily rhythm like? It can't just be voting, voting, voting.
No, there's a definite structure. The day starts with mass. Then they break for lunch. Back to the chapel for the afternoon voting session. Then in the evening, they have vespers, evening prayers. After that, they head back to their accommodation, the Casa Santa Marta.
Which is that guest house inside the Vatican.
Exactly. Though apparently, with 133 electors this time, they've needed some overflow space nearby, too.
Ah, okay.
And there's another interesting provision. If, after 3 full days of voting, there's still no result,
Yes.
they can take a pause. A whole day dedicated just to prayer and reflection. A chance to step back, maybe discuss things informally outside the chapel, and just discern.
A day for reflection amid all that intensity? I can see how necessary that might be. Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the ballot itself. What does it look like? How do they cast their vote?
Each cardinal gets a rectangular card. Printed at the top are the Latin words, Eligo in summum pontificem.
Which means?
I elect the supreme pontiff. Below that, they write the name of their chosen candidate. They're supposed to disguise their handwriting somewhat.
Interesting. Then what?
Then they fold the ballot twice, hold it up high, walk to the altar, and place it in this large, ornate urn, often saying a short prayer as they do. It's a very deliberate, very prayerful action.
Okay, so all the ballots are in the urn. What happens next? It's not just a quick count, I assume.
Definitely not. It's quite elaborate. First, 3 cardinals are chosen by lot to be scrutineers. They're the ones who actually count the votes.
Okay, the tellers.
Right. Then, 3 others, the infirmari, are chosen again by lot to collect ballots from any cardinal who might be sick and unable to leave their room in the Casa Santa Marta.
Ah, so everyone eligible gets to vote, even if unwell.
Yes. And finally, 3 more cardinals, the reviders, are chosen to double-check the scrutineers' count.
So lots of checks and balances.
Precisely. Accuracy and transparency within the process are key.
And then comes the part everyone outside is waiting for the burning of the ballots. The smoke signal? How does that actually work? Black smoke? White smoke?
It's actually quite ingenious. After the votes are counted and checked, and the results recorded, the ballots are threaded together with a needle and thread right through the word Goa.
Creates a sort of chain of votes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then these bundles of ballots are placed into a special stoves that's installed in the chapel just for the conclave. Now, if no one reached the two-thirds majority,
Yuck, smoke.
right, they add specific chemical cartridges to the fire, something damp, maybe wet straw historically, now specific chemicals to make sure the smoke comes out thick and black. Tells the crowd, nope, not yet.
And if someone has been elected,
Then they burn the ballots without the black smoke chemicals, or perhaps with different chemicals that ensure the smoke is clearly white.
so it's a chemical reaction basically dictating the color.
Essentially, yes, ensuring a clear signal that white smoke tells the world.
Habemus Popum, we have a pope.
Exactly. And that smoke travels up a flue, installed for the occasion, to the chimney on the Sistine Chapel roof.
Ah, I read that Vatican firefighters are actually on standby too.
Just in case. Sensible, I suppose. You wouldn't want anything to go wrong at that moment. And yeah, when that white smoke appears, it's now also accompanied by the ringing of the main bells of St. Peter's Basilica.
Ah, so double confirmation, no mistaking it.
Right. That was added more recently, I think in 2005, precisely because sometimes the smoke color wasn't perfectly clear. Bills leave no doubt.
That must be an incredible moment in St. Peter's Square. The white smoke, the bells. So, the world knows. What's the very next step for the man just elected?
Inside the chapel, the dean of the College of Cardinals, that's the senior cardinal bishop, goes up to the elected cardinal.
And asks him.
He asks, basically, do you accept your canonical election as supreme pontiff? It's a formal question.
He has to say yes. Could he refuse?
He could, theoretically. It's happened, though very rarely in history. But assuming he accepts, the dean then asks him, by what name do you wish to be called?
And that's when he chooses his papal name.
That's the moment. After he accepts and chooses his name, the other cardinals come forward one by one to pledge their obedience to the new pope.
And then there's this place called the Room of Tears. What's that about? Sounds dramatic.
It does. It's a small room right next to the Sistine Chapel. It's where the new pope goes immediately after accepting the election to change out of his cardinal's red robes and into the white people cassock for the first time.
Why tears?
Well, the name is thought to reflect the overwhelming emotion of that moment. Maybe joy, certainly the immense weight of the responsibility just placed upon him. Probably a few tears are shed, yes.
I can imagine. And they have the white cassocks ready for him?
Yes, apparently they have 3 sizes prepared, small, medium, large, because they don't know who will be elected.
Practical.
And there was even talk this time, according to one report, about potentially recycling cassocks from previous popes. A sign of continuity, maybe? Or just frugality.
Interesting detail. So he changes into the white cassock in the Room of Tears. Then what?
Then the senior cardinal deacon goes to the central balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, the Loggia of Blessings.
The famous balcony.
The very one. And he announces to the crowds, Annuntio vobis gaudium magnum, habemus papam. I announce to you a great joy, we have a pope. Then he reveals the name of the newly elected pope and the name he has chosen.
And then the new pope appears.
Yes. Moments later, the new pope himself steps out onto the balcony for the first time, gives his blessing urbi et orbi to the city and the world, and greets the people. It's his first public appearance as pope.
An incredible sequence of events, and it's amazing how much of this is rooted so deep in history. Where did this whole idea of a conclave even come from? The locked room.
Ah, the origin story is quite something. The word conclave itself comes from the Latin cum clave, meaning with a key.
Literally locked in.
Exactly. And it goes back to a papal election in Viterbo, Italy, that dragged on for ages from 1268 to 1271. Almost 3 years.
3 years, wow.
Yeah, the cardinals just couldn't agree. The local people and authorities got so fed up, they eventually locked the cardinals inside the papal palace.
Took matters into their own hands.
They did. First, they restricted their food, passing only bread and water through a window. When that didn't work, the story goes, and Georgetown University's material mentions this. They actually removed the roof of the palace.
Remove the roof? Seriously?
Exposed them to the elements. The idea was, maybe some divine inspiration or just a discomfort would speed things up.
That is extreme. Did it work?
It did. They finally elected Pope Gregory X. And he, having experienced that ordeal, was the one who then formally established the rules for the conclave. basically decreeing that future electors should be locked in to encourage a quicker decision.
Incredible. Talk about an incentive. That puts the current arrangements in perspective, doesn't it?
It certainly does. No roof removals expected this time.
Let's hope not. Another historical aspect is the papal name. You mentioned he chooses it right after accepting. Why do they take a new name? Why not just use their birth name?
Well, for the first few centuries, they did use their baptismal names. The shift happened around 533 AD. A priest named Mercurius was elected.
Mercurius, like the Roman god Mercury.
Exactly. He felt that having a pope named after a pagan god wasn't quite right for the head of the church. So he decided to take a new name, John II, honoring a previous Pope John.
Ah, so that started the tradition.
Pretty much. Since then, it's become standard practice. The new pope chooses a name, often to signal continuity with a predecessor he admires, or maybe to indicate the kind of papacy he envisions.
Like Pope Francis choosing a name never used before, honoring St. Francis of Assisi.
Precisely. That sent a clear message about poverty, simplicity, peace. Other names get used repeatedly. John, Gregory, Benedict, Clement, Leo, Pius.
So the choice of name itself can be the first real clue about the new pope's priorities.
It definitely can be. If someone chose, say, Pius III, you might expect a very traditionalist papacy. Choosing a name like Francis II, or something completely new, would signal something different. It's something everyone watches closely.
A symbolic first act. Now, the smoke signal, we know white means success. You said the bells were added in 2005. When did the white smoke itself start? Was it always part of it?
Actually, no. Burning the ballots to produce smoke after the counts is older, but the distinction between black and white smoke is relatively recent.
Oh.
According to both Georgetown and CBS, the dedicated use of white smoke to signal a successful election only began in 1914.
Really? That late? So before that?
Before 1914, they apparently only used black smoke, or just, smoke, to indicate an unsuccessful vote. The absence of smoke after a voting session might have meant success, or maybe just a delay. It wasn't always clear.
So white smoke brought clarity.
Exactly. They realized they needed a positive, unambiguous signal for habemus papam. And then, as we said, the bells were added later to make it absolutely crystal clear, avoiding any confusion about grayish smoke.
Bells and white smoke. Got it. Now, duration. We mentioned that Viterbo election taking nearly 3 years, which is mind-boggling. What's the range, typically?
History shows a huge range. CBS News points out the shortest was maybe Pope Pius III in 1503, elected in just hours, possibly on the first ballot.
Hours.
At the other end, you have Viterbo. But thankfully, recent conclaves have been much quicker.
Like the last few.
Yeah. Pope Francis in 2013 took about 2 days, 5 ballots. Benedict XVI in 2005 was even faster, less than 24 hours, 4 ballots. John Paul II in 1978 took about 2 days, maybe 8 ballots.
So the modern trend seems to be, 2 or 3 days?
Generally, yes, though you can never be certain. It depends entirely on how the cardinals coalesce around a candidate. But recent history suggests it probably won't be a protracted affair.
Okay, that's good context. Now, thinking about this specific conclave, who is actually eligible to be pope? We know who the electors are, but who can they vote for?
Well, technically, according to canon law, as Georgetown notes, any baptized male Catholic who is unmarried is eligible.
So theoretically, they could elect a priest or even a layman?
Theoretically, yes, but in practice, for centuries, the Pope has always been chosen from among the College of Cardinals. It's just the established tradition. So realistically, they'll be choosing from one of the 133 cardinal electors in that room.
And you mentioned this particular group of electors is quite diverse.
Very. And significantly, Pope Francis appointed a large majority of them, 108 out of the 133 eligible.
108 out of 133, that's a huge majority.
It is. And they come from 71 different countries. So Francis really shaped the body that is now electing his successor.
That definitely suggests potential continuity, doesn't it? We talked about the cardinal's oath of secrecy, but it's not just the cardinals who take it, right?
Correct. That oath binds everyone involved, even peripherally. Think about the drivers, the cooks, the cleaners, doctors, technicians, anyone who might come into contact with the cardinals or the process during the conclave.
Total information lockdown.
Exactly. And in the digital age, they take it very seriously. We mentioned the bug sweeps, the jammers. There are armed guards, Swiss guards, Vatican police patrolling the area. It's a secure zone.
And there's another Latin phrase associated with this secrecy.
Right. Besides extra omnes, which starts the voting, there's also vacante omnes.
Meaning?
Everyone. Out. Similar idea. Used to formally seal the conclave area, ensuring that confidentiality is maintained.
It's quite something. Now, a big question floating around is about geography. Pope Francis was the first non-European pope in over 1,200 years, the first ever from the Americas. What are the chances we might see another pope from the global south?
That's a really key point. As Georgetown highlights, the demographic reality is that the majority of Catholics today live in the global south, Latin America, Africa, Asia. So there's definitely a strong hope and maybe expectation in those regions for representation.
History has seen African popes before, though, right? Way back.
Yes, there were a few in the very early church. The last one, usually cited, is Pope Gelasius III, who died in 496, so it's been a very long time.
And the current breakdown of electors, still Eurocentric?
Europe still has the largest single bloc, with 53 electors. Italy alone has a significant number. And after 3 consecutive non-Italian popes, Polish, German, Argentinian popes, there's some speculation, that maybe the Italian cardinals or others might feel it's time for an Italian pope again.
So a potential tension between the global demographics of the church and the historical weight of Europe, particularly Italy.
Exactly. It's one of the underlying dynamics to watch. Where will the consensus form?
And Pope Francis himself was a first in another way, the first Jesuit pope. Was that a big deal historically? And could we see another?
It was definitely notable. The Jesuits, the Society of Jesus, are a major religious order, but they're actually younger than some others, founded in the 16th century.
Okay.
Plus, they had that period of suppression in the 18th and 19th centuries where the order was basically shut down by papal decree for a while. So historically, a Jesuit pope seemed perhaps less likely.
Made Francis's election quite historic then.
It did. But looking at this conclave, the Georgetown material points out there are only, I think, 3 Jesuit cardinals currently eligible to vote.
Only 3 out of 133.
Right. So statistically, the odds of electing a second Jesuit pope right after the first one seem relatively low. Not impossible, but less likely.
That's fascinating context. So whoever emerges from that chimney smoke, they're stepping into a role with, well, a pretty daunting inbox. What are the major challenges facing the next pope?
Oh, the list is long and complex. There are huge ongoing discussions about the role of women within the church structure. The question of how to minister to and include LGBTQ plus Catholics is very prominent and often divisive.
Yeah.
Then there's managing the relationship with the growing dynamic churches in the global south, often with different priorities than European or North American churches.
Or in the abuse crisis.
Absolutely. Dealing with the legacy of the clerical sexual abuse scandals, ensuring accountability, transparency, healing for victims, there remains a critical ongoing task. And of course, fostering dialogue with other religions in an often polarized world.
Huge issues. That tension you mentioned between tradition and calls for more inclusion, especially regarding LGBTQ plus people, seems particularly challenging.
It really is. It touches on fundamental questions of doctrine, pastoral care, and how the church engages with modern society. The path the new pope takes on this will be watched very, very closely. His early words, his appointments, they'll all be scrutinized for signals.
And given that Francis appointed so many of the electors, is the general expectation for continuity? Or could there be a surprise pivot?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Logically, having appointed around 80% of the voters, you'd expect a degree of continuity. Many cardinals likely share Francis's general vision, especially his emphasis on synodality.
Synodality, that word comes up a lot with Francis. What exactly does it mean in practice?
He described it as coming together, basically. It emphasizes more listening, more dialogue, more collaboration between different parts of the church, laity, priests, bishops, the Vatican. It's a less top-down, more journeying together approach to church governance.
So trying to make the church more consultative.
That's the idea. How fully the next pope embraces and implements that vision will be a key indicator of continuity or change.
Pope Francis certainly modeled a particular style of leadership, didn't he? That focus on the margins.
Absolutely. The Georgetown piece really highlights this powerfully. Even towards the end, dealing with his own health issues, he was still making these gestures.
Like visiting prisoners.
Yes. Visiting prisoners, apparently even emptying his personal bank account to help them, making calls to the tiny Catholic community suffering in Gaza.
Wow.
And his requests for his own funeral. Asking for migrants, Muslims, homeless people, prisoners, even transgender individuals to be part of the honor guard. That speaks volumes.
It really does, a radical gesture of inclusion.
And his choices about where to live, not the apostolic palace and requesting a simple tomb, it all seemed very connected to that ancient papal title, Servus Servorum Dei.
Servant of the servants of God.
Exactly. He seemed to embody that in a very tangible way. That's a powerful legacy for the cardinals to consider.
A powerful legacy indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, so the cardinals are inside. The process is underway. We've done our deep dive into how it works, the history, the context. What are the main things for us, to take away as we wait for that smoke?
Well, I think first is just appreciating the conclave as this incredibly detailed, structured process born from centuries of tradition, all aimed at prayerful discernment. Second, understanding its history. Viterbo, the names, the smoke, help see how it evolved into this unique election.
Right.
And third, recognizing the global makeup of these electors really underlines the universal nature of the church today and the sheer diversity of perspectives inside that room.
And as we watch that chimney, we need to remember it could be quick, maybe even today or tomorrow, based on recent history, or it could take a little longer if they need more time to find that two-thirds consensus.
Precisely. Patience is required.
Which leads to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over while we wait.
Yes.
When we finally know the new pope, pay close attention to the name he chooses. What might that name signal about his priorities? Which parts of Pope Francis's legacy do you think these cardinals, his appointees mostly, will want to carry forward? And what new challenges might they feel need addressing most urgently?
That choice of name, it's often the very first window into the future direction of the papacy. It's a fascinating moment to think about where the Catholic Church might be heading next.